Shalom, everybody. Today we'll start the chapter talking about Kiddush, both on Friday night and Shabbat, of course. Later we'll talk about Havdalah. It's very well organized. So, because we're going to talk in the Kiddush about what is the belief that we express in the Kiddush, I thought that we should compare the two main opinions, Jewish philosophy of what the principles of faith are. So the first one is Maimonides, also chronologically. Um, and I really like this English translation, and I'll show you in a minute the second one. So the first belief is, I believe in the existence of the Creator who is perfect in every manner of existence and is the primary cause of all that exists. So the reason I like this translation better than the one of Sepharia is because the one of Sepharia uses the pronoun he several times. It's how it's printed in the Sidurim. Maimonides is not the one who wrote these anima, means these statements of complete belief, uh, but but somebody later on, either before Sidurim were printed or just after, that's when they appeared in the Sidurim. So somebody in the 500 years more or less that passed between Maimonides' time and the printing, somebody compiled, anonymous person compiled these 13 principles, and so it says, I believe with complete faith that the Creator, blessed is His name, is the Creator and guide of all created things, and He alone has made, does make, and will make all things. So this is the opinion of Maimonides. And later on in history, I think about 200 years later, Sefer HaIkarim, Rav Yosef Elbo, wrote, first of all, in the third paragraph or chapter of the introduction, he brings the 13 principles of Maimonides and then argues with them and says, therefore, it seems to me that the general and essential principles of divine law are three: existence of God, providence in reward and punishment, meaning that Hashem cares about what we do or don't do in this world, and the divine revelation, which is either the actual written Torah or the words of the prophets, but either way, he narrows it down to three instead of 13. It's not that he doesn't believe that the Mashiach will come, which is probably the most famous animamin, because there's like 100 different tunes. It's just that he thinks that a person can be a good Jew and an Orthodox Jew without having to believe in the other 10 that aren't mentioned in his three. So I just want to give that as an introduction, because we are talking not only about halacha but also Jewish philosophy, because like we said in the previous chapter, we are testifying to Hashem's creating the world, and that's why we read by Chulu. That was one of the last halachot that we learned. And so here is the beginning of chapter 6. As we have seen above, there are two crucial mitzvot that form the backbone of Shabbat, Zachor and Shamor. So Zachor literally means remember, and Shamor means keep or guard. Shamor instructs us to refrain from all labor. In this way, we clear space in our soul, which we are commanded to fill with positive content. This positive content is included in Zachor, which instructs us to remember the holiness of Shabbat and use it to connect with the foundations of our faith, as we just mentioned before. For 6 days, we are active in the outside world. On Shabbat, we return to our inner world, to our soul, and remind ourselves once again of the fundamentals of faith. The first fundamental that we recall during Kiddush is the creation of the world, and like we saw, both Rav Elbo and Maimonides believe that that is a very important principle of our faith, or fundamental of our faith. And the second is the Exodus from Egypt. That is, again, in Maimonides, but not in Rabbi Yosef Elbo. There are some who concede that God created the world, but do not believe that even following creation, God remains responsible for the ongoing existence of the world. By the way, this was the main Greek opinion, which is Olam Kadmon, meaning that the world was created at one point, but after that, after the first, I'll call it sarcastically, the first push of this big marble we call Earth, that was the end of Hashem's providence, God forbid, over the world. And we believe that the only reason why we are alive today and experiencing this is because Hashem has a purpose for us to be involved in the creation and to be rewarded, or God forbid, the other one, if we do or don't keep His laws. At the time of the Exodus, God's divine providence was very clearly revealed in a way that made it clear that God reveals himself to the world by way of the Jewish people. So I'll just add that again, the Ten Commandments don't start with believe that I am the God who created the world, but specifically for the Jewish people, I am the God who took you out of Egypt. And so that's how we reaffirm our belief that there is providence and Hashem does care about what we do or don't do. This is the significance of the second foundational belief that we mention in Kiddush. These two foundational beliefs are mentioned in the Torah's two versions of the Ten Commandments. In Shemot, we are commanded to remember the creation of the world, commemorate the day of Shabbat, to sanctify it, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed Shabbat day and hallowed it. So again, I didn't say that Hashem doesn't mention the creation, he just doesn't mention it in the first, what we call commandment, but really it's supposed to be utterance or diber. However, the mitzvah is formulated with the word Shamor in Devarim, and there the exodus from Egypt is mentioned. Observe the day of Shabbat to sanctify it, for you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to keep the day of Shabbat. In truth, there is a connection between Shabbat and the Exodus from Egypt, for they both reveal the divine soul, which brings about our freedom from enslavement, whether to Egypt or to work. And we'll discuss this, of course, further as we go deeper into the chapter. We fulfill the essence of Zachor when we recite Kiddush over wine, thereby sanctifying the whole day. As it is written, commemorate the day of Shabbat to sanctify it. And that's a quote again from the Ten Commandments. The entire day should be sanctified and set aside for reviewing foundational beliefs and studying Torah while eating pleasurable meals and sleeping soundly, as we talked about in the third chapter. Even during the week, there is a mitzvah to remember Shabbat and sanctify it, meaning it should be honored more than other days. One should prepare for it by making food, laundering, bathing, and cleaning one's home. Chapter 2 above, not chapter 3. Both men and women are obligated in mitzvot of Shabbat, although women are generally exempt from time-bound positive commandments, and therefore, if Zachor is such a mitzvah, women are nevertheless obligated because Zachor and Shamor were proclaimed together by God. We don't understand how that is possible, but only God can do such a thing. They are intertwined, just as women are obligated in the mitzvot derived from Shamor, because nobody will say that a woman is allowed to suddenly break Shabbat, etc. The negative commandments, so too they are obligated in the mitzvot derived from Zachor, the positive commandments. But for example, and this is how it'll end, a woman who's alone does have to do Kiddush, but there's a different opinion that says that her lighting candles is her way of Zachor. So that's just a practical example. Therefore, men and women are equally obligated in Shabbat mitzvot, and a woman may recite Kiddush for a man and exempt him from his obligation, but minors who have not yet reached the Barabat mitzvah cannot exempt adults, because even children who are old enough to understand what Shabbat is about are still only obligated rabbinically in Kiddush, whereas adults have a Torah obligation. So we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow with how we actually fulfill the mitzvah of Zachor.